Alright, what's going on, crew? Welcome to the tutorial. Little bit of novice here, got no idea how this is gonna go down, but I hope it provides you with some value somehow. So this is Lightroom, just opened it up from my desktop, and I'm just gonna run you through my workflow of how I go about editing my photos. So you can see here in the bottom left hand corner, I tried to find out how to make my mouse bigger, but couldn't really figure that one out. So I hope you can see it all good. Gonna click the import button in the bottom left corner here. And every time I take photos, I upload them to my hard drive in a folder. So you'll see here, I've got a couple different folders, but most of the time I put them in my photo folder, and then I give them a date from the year to the month to the day, and then kind of summarize it with what I did that day or where I was. So got like plenty here from 2017, November the 25th was at Dotty's Beach with Dad, like that kind of thing. So we were gonna go through some photos from Oman and then see how we're going for time. So we'll start with Oman, and these are all the pictures from Oman here that pop up. We're gonna check, so you can uncheck or check them. So we'll check them all and then click import. That's going to throw them just in the all photographs category or in the previous import until you import more photos, obviously. So all my photos from Oman are now on the Lightroom. We're in the library section right now. As you can see up here, it's highlighted. To edit the photos, we click into develop. So now we're in what's called the develop module. With the presets that I have already saved, I go to the left hand side here. Beneath this picture there's a subheading called presets, and I used my Oman presets, which are in one of the subcategories here. Oman, here we go. So the Oman pack. So I've got 4 presets already saved from Oman. So we can click through these and see how they look. So that's Oman, Oman 1, Oman 2, super original names, and Oman Island. Kind of like all of them, so I think maybe we'll just stick with Oman to start with. Can kind of see here that my skin is a little bit orange, and the aqua kind of stands out, which I like as a contrast to the wall, which kind of has that like beige color, and the wood beneath it with the rope kind of gives it a bit of a rustic look, which is nice. But just going through all the settings here that I use to edit to get to that phase. So the temperature and the tint is what's you've probably heard as the white balance. So you can see if we change the temp, it makes it cooler or warmer. And then if I move that to 0, you'll see the tint, which makes it green when you go way too far to the left, and purple when you go too far to the right. So it's just about finding a nice contrast between them that works with the colors that you have in the photo. Most people kind of like the brown skin kind of thing, and that comes about, as you can probably imagine, when you're a kid and you're just like painting and you mix the green paint with the yellow paint. So if you go to like the green tint, not too far obviously, but just I normally go to about -8 or -10, and then with the temperature mover up, then it really brings out all the yellows and the browns, which was pretty cool for this photo because all the colors kind of work well with that kind of color palette. And then if you'd shot it under or overexposed, then you can change that with the exposure tool. Kind of brings out like all the shadows, I reckon. So I kind of like shooting a little bit under and then lifting the exposure, or and then crushing the highlights if you've shot it a little bit over, and then bringing up the shadows as well. So traditionally I'll normally go highlights all the way down to the left quite a bit, and a lot of people kind of like that contrasty look, and that's probably the way most people have been taught, is like darks and lights, but I kind of like the look the opposite way when the shadows are raised. So I take my highlights and my whites right down normally and do the opposite with my blacks and shadows. So that's what I've done here. If you go too hard with the clarity tool, it kind of makes it look like a painting. I went through a phase where I was going a bit too hard on that. So I just keep that between like 5 and 10 normally. You can get a pretty artsy look by going the opposite way. It kind of gives it like a dreamy kind of look, but you'll need to sharpen it up down a bit further down with the sharpener tool if you want to do that. A lot of people use that look. It looks pretty cool as well, I reckon. But for this edit, I've got the clarity about 5. And then I normally take all the saturation out just because then you can put in the saturation individually a bit further down in the HSL, which we'll get to in a bit. So if you take the saturation out, it kind of flattens it out a bit so that all colors are a bit more even. And then the vibrance just still gives it that little pop. So I keep that like pretty low or still like even just like -1 or 2. But don't really touch that too much. This is the RGB tone curve here, which is pretty much just the same as the shadows and highlights, but on a curve, so you can kind of play around with it, be a bit more specific. If yours doesn't look like mine, I remember going through a phase where I was like, what's going on here? And that's this little box here. You want it to be linear, which is when you can start to play with it a bit more. Because I remember for a while, I used to have it like a different setting. I can't really remember what it was. Anyway, it used to hit me for 6 because everyone was like editing with their tone curve and mine didn't look like that. So if yours doesn't look as this one does, then maybe that's why. So basically this bottom left third here, that's your shadows, and then a bit further into the graph is the midtones, and then the top right third is your highlights. So as I've done up here with the sliders, I kind of do the same with my shadows and highlights here, but to give it, like a lot of people will tell you to go dark shadows and light lights, as I said earlier. Like you can see that raises the highlights and that darkens the shadows. So by still kind of keeping that opposite way, which is what I do, you can kind of get the opposite shape today. So the traditional shape would be low on the shadows and high on the highlights, but I go the opposite, so low on the highlights and higher in the shadows, to get that kind of travel-y vintage vibe. I like to put a bit of fade in, which is when you raise I think that's the y-axis, but this bar here, the column that's solid on the left here, if you raise the dot there, if you raise that up, then it's called crushing the blacks when you bring the fade out over the blacks. I kind of like that look, so mine ends up having a bit of a curve, like a pretty even curve. But yeah, just have a play around there. That's a pretty fun way to get a unique look. I also, if you click the channel here and click red, you can get some real artsy looks going, because this is the highlights, shadows and midtones of the reds, and you can do the same with your greens and blues there as well. So maybe have a little play around there. And now we're down to your HSL sliders, which is where we bring in the colors and take out the colors you don't like. A lot of people just like focus on the hue at a time, but I like to just have them all spread out so that you can have your hues here, your shadows and your luminance all like in a row kind of thing, so you don't go individually through. HSL, if you didn't know, stands for hue, saturation and luminance. I remember watching a tutorial when I was like super new and they were using HSL and I was like, what? So if you were a little confused, then that's why. So your reds, I normally drag them towards the orange, but you can take them towards the red and then take the red shadow saturation out. That gives it a pretty cool look, but I normally take them towards the orange and then don't really touch my orange hue. Greens, greens is good when you're editing ocean for getting some nice colors with the water. We'll go through that in a sec. So then the only other colors here that are of reference are the oranges, kind of blues and reds. So for the saturation, you can see that if we pump the reds, it doesn't really have too much effect. But the oranges, you'll see, really are quite pronounced when you pump them too much. Kind of comes a bit too dominating, I reckon. So I keep them pretty low, like probably between -5 and -10. And then yellows as well on this one kind of has a bit of an effect on the beigey color of the wall, and brings out the yellows in the pots as well. So keep that pretty low as well. That's kind of my vibe, just a bit more desaturated for those that don't speak slang. And then you can see there are a couple pots there that are kind of aqua and blue. So I don't know, you can have a play around and decide what kind of colors you're going for there. I guess my overall vibe is a bit more desaturated, so all mine are pretty low on the saturation column. I also like to lift the luminance on all things except the skin tones. So an orange skin tone can obviously change things quite drastically. What do you guys reckon of that skin tone? I mean, pretty tanned, I guess, but probably a bit too dark for a picture. So I generally keep that about -15, depends per the photo. But reds can also have a big effect on this the skin tone depending on the angle. Like if we zoom right in here on my face, then you'll be able to see the reds changing in the shadows of my face a bit more. So that's a bit of personal preference. I kind of like darker kind of skin tones. So yeah, I keep them pretty low as well. But pretty much everything else I raise in the luminance column. So the yellows, I'll zoom back out. So you can see yellows can really make the image a lot darker. But I like to keep the yellows quite bright across the board too. And then, yeah, I really like the look when you have colors desaturated or like barely pronounced, and then raise them in the luminance. So like the blue, for example, we've got here at like 5, say, and then have it at like +30 for the luminance. You'll see that's a bit more, will have a bit more of effect for the beachy photos. Split toning is a big one. I love split toning. Didn't really use it for a long time, but basically it's just the colors. So you've got your highlights and your shadows, which we changed from darker to lighter earlier. But you can inject colors into the shadows and the highlights here, and that's split toning. So I like to have warmer tones in the highlights and cooler tones in the shadows. So basically, if you click this box here, it'll give you recommended ones across the top here. So for the warmer in the highlights, I click this box in the middle, which is 37, and then I bring that down. You can see how much of an effect that has on the highlights there. So if we pump them to 100, you can see, and then just bringing it back down to a color that kind of suits the photo, to an amount that suits the photo, sorry. So normally like about 10 is nice. And then with the shadows, I just go to the lightest and lightest kind of color. So go that one, which is 215. And then I like to have the shadows at about 5. So 10 and 5 is pretty nice. So cooler colors are like your blues and your kind of greeny blues. Bluey greens, sorry. And then your warmer colors are like the ones, your reds and your yellows and your oranges kind of thing. So yeah, just have a little play around. You can get real creative there. As you can see, there's a gazillion different colors you can pick. And then I have the sharpening up pretty high, like about 100. And the other thing that I wanted to show you was, this is how you do a vignette. So in the effects subheading here, if you take the highlight priority, so go to highlight priority, and drag the amount to below 0, you give it a bit of vignette, which puts a bit of emphasis on the subject. It's pretty nice, but not too much. I kind of like it like -5. And then grain, I have been guilty of going a bit over the top on the grain, but I love that artsy effect that it gives it. You can't really see it when it's far away, and probably not because this recording is in a really high ISO, so it looks grainy anyway. But if you go to like 75, say, and then you zoom in, you can see the grain. I'm not sure if you can see that. It'd probably be more obvious on me here. You can see the grain, which gives a pretty nice little effect. And then just kind of drag it down until it's kind of grainy in the bits that are out of focus and not so grainy in the bits that are. That's what I go for with grain. Not sure what everybody else does, but that's what I like. And yeah, just have a play around until you find what you like. So that's like a streetsy kind of photo. Also kind of like my Portugal presets for street photos. There were heaps of really nice streets in Portugal, so these preset pack kind of suit the street edits quite nicely as well. Actually probably better than my Oman edits. So we'll find one with water. Here we go. This was a pretty cool picky. This one, this crazy hole in the ground in Oman was just ridiculous. So here's the overall photo. It's a little bit overexposed. So if we use one of the Oman edits here, then you can see that it takes the greens and turns them into the blues, which is the kind of only difference here other than everything else that we went through. So as you can see, the warmer kind of color in the with the white balance, and went to the purples with the tint on this one. Shadow highlights and whites down, shadows and blacks up. A bit more clarity, not much going on there with the saturation and vibrance, and then same kind of curve with the tone curve there, lots of fade going on. But down in the hue of the green is what I wanted to show you. So the green here, you can see how big of an effect that has on the water. So if we zoom right in, you can see a couple people there. But if you look at this area of the water here, if we change the hue of the green here, you can see how it turns the greens into blues, which is I'm assuming how a lot of other people get their hyper blue, crazy blue water. But yeah, I wouldn't go too hard on that, but it is a nice way to get a consistent blue with your water. Let's go to another one. So here we go. This is a pretty nice one of Hailsar sitting on the front of the boat. Looks pretty good raw. Probably wouldn't want to change too much. But if we throw the preset I made here for the island on, you can see that it really brings out the blues. So how you do that is what I was saying with the luminance of the blue. If you lift the colors that relate to the water, so the blues and the aquas and the greens, if you lift them, then it will, like if we drag that right down, you can see that it lifts them up. And then if you pump the saturation a bit, it gives it some really nice colors in the water. And the green here on the hue, the green hue is right at the edge here, so that gives it that consistent color in the blue. The only problem that you then have when you pump the blue to get nice water is the sky. So a little trick, I guess, is to not do too much with the saturation and just play all the tricks with the hue and the luminance. Yeah, I like to take the blues out in the saturation and then, like I was saying, lift the luminance. Gives it a pretty nice look. But yeah, you can't really go wrong with the brown skin and blue water. A lot of people love that, so you got to find your own kind of style, I guess. But I hope my presets are a good way for you to get a bit of a taste of how to edit And yeah, if you have any questions, send me a message. Be more than fizzing to help you out where I can and give you some tips outside of anything that I've done here. I know when I was watching my first tutorial, I had so many questions that I wish I could have asked. So if you do have any questions, just swing me a message, and I'm sure I can find some time in my extremely busy schedule to help you out. Yeah, no, I'm just joking. Just drop me a line and say hi. All right, peace.